the fourth season of the Kayak Bass Connection podcast. I am your host, Jared. So we're still proud to be the official podcast of the Southern Illinois Kayak Club Bass Tournament Trail. Even in the dead of winter, we're still talking fishing. So tonight is going to be interesting. So if you have ever been curious about the use of Livescope in modern fishing kayaks, you're going to enjoy this episode. So we've assembled an all-star panel of anglers, some with a lot of experience, some with not much, on use of the Cheaters box. I mean, not Cheaters box, Livescope. So we have some of the best anglers who are now using some of the best, newest tools, newest technology. So you're going to recognize the guests we have on our panel discussion tonight. So each one of these folks have been guests several times on the podcast. Glad to see them all coming back. So we have Jonathan Kessler, Darren Hemker, and Susie Q. I love that. See, just Susie Q. So here's the question I wanted to ask each one of you. First of all, thanks for being here. Secondly, what's your experience with Livescope?
Yeah,
Jonathan, I want to start with you.
I've been using Livescope, I think, for 2 seasons. I use Laurent's graphs with Active Target 1 transducer. So like kind of their first generation Livescope. Been using it for the last 2 years.
Awesome. Darren, what about you?
So I use a Garmin. I have a Garmin, I think it's the LV32, I think is what their transducer is. That's the transducer I have on my Livescope, and it's a 9-inch screen. I think I've had it for 2.5 seasons now, going on 3 seasons. I think this will be my 4th season with it. I don't know. I've had it for quite a while, so I'm learning a lot about it, or have learned a lot about it.
So now, Susie, you're brand new to this game, so you just got a unit, right?
I've never used Livescope before. I've seen other people have it on their kayaks and whatnot, but I am finally diving into the deep end, and I did get a Garmin unit, so we're gonna see what this is all about. Definitely gonna be a learning experience, that's for sure.
That's awesome, Jonathan and Darren. One of the first things you guys said when we were talking before we hit the record button is that you use your Livescope in a very different ways. The two of you do now. So can you kind of jump into that a little bit, Jonathan and Darren? How do you guys use this technology differently?
For starters, I think I use mine like deep a lot more often and kind of offshore a little bit, where I think Darren might use his a little bit more shallow. We've actually been out together, and like when I'm picking my Livescope up, because I'm like, this is too shallow, I don't want to use it. And I've noticed Darren keeps his depth. Just set it to like 5-foot depth. So I know that there's definitely situationally, we kind of use them a little bit differently. And so that's one aspect. And I think I have a lot more practice with sort of finesse Livescope fishing in terms of, I've, at least this last year, I tried to get a lot of experience with like moping and strolling and a lot of those types of techniques, fishing little minnows and stuff like that with it. So my understanding, and Darren can talk more about this, he uses it a lot to power fish too.
Yeah, so Kessler, the way I would describe it is Kessler uses his to catch fish. I use mine to find places that fish will be. So I very rarely look and say, oh, that's a bass, I'm going to throw my bait on its head. Most of the time what I do is I scan, I see, oh, there's a lay down here that's not visible above the surface. Throw baits on top of the brush pile. So I don't use it specifically to pinpoint fish to fish or bait or anything. I use it to find stuff that fish are going to be near. I find that extremely effective, especially in our Southern Illinois lakes where the fish don't hang out deep as often. Most of our lakes are power fishing. I mean, it's very rare a tournament's out deep.
So you're finding structure, you're finding habitat, and then you target that structure.
And I don't specifically just go around looking for structure. I'm power fishing the bank. And if I see structure, then I throw to it. I don't specifically go out looking for structure. So my Livescope might be on all day, but I look at it 150, 200 times a day. I look at it all the time, but I'm not staring at it, only using it. I'm using everything all the way up and down the bank, looking down at it to hopefully see something over here I can throw at is more what I use it for.
I get the impression that I stare at mine all day. If anything, what Livescope has taught me is the importance of I use my side scan, I think, more and more effectively now after getting Livescope than I did. And that's mostly because seeing how what the fish are doing, how they're reacting, how they hold the structure, what they're keen on has allowed me to learn how to be more effective with side scan. And side scan is way more effective like getting a look at a much larger portion of the lake and what you're going past. So if anything, strangely enough, I think Livescope has helped me be more effective all around with like all the aspects of imaging.
Interesting. Susie, any questions come to mind as you hear them describing how they're using it?
It definitely makes sense with, the different ways and formats that they're using it. I guess my first question is how did you learn to decipher between, or if you have learned to decipher between like bass and non-bass?
Oh,
Well, that's a good
boy.
question. That's a good
Kessler.
question.
This is hilarious. The first time Kessler ever had his on the water, I believe I was on the lake that day. And I go by what he's looking at. He's like, there's bass all over this shell bed, I think is where it was on Cedar. Bass all over it. And I was like, those are not bass, those are catfish. And I just go by. Didn't say a word to him. 30 minutes later, he comes up behind me. He's like, I caught one and it was a catfish. And I was like, I just could tell because I looked at it for 6 months as to where it was his first day with it. It was very, very, very funny.
As somebody I don't have any experience live with a Garmin graph, but from watching videos and just seeing the little like videos that I've seen of Garmin versus Lowrance, and I think it's really nice that we have kind of users of both here. I really think Garmin is much more clear if you want to be able to like see and distinguish the fish. Lowrance is more of I see a mark, I can tell that's a fish. There's sort of like with the Lowrance graph, especially if you're looking 80 foot out, is kind of like a standard, I think, for me. About 80 foot forward and maybe about 25, 30 foot depth. When a fish gets to about 18 to 20 inches, a bass gets about 18 to 20 inches, what I've started to notice is you will see sort of almost looks like two fish right behind each other because you can start to distinguish the main body and the tail separately almost. But that's like it has to be over 18 inches for you to be able to really distinguish, well, that's a large fish, and for you to start to see some of those details. I think Garmin gives you much better detail in seeing like the resolution at the scale of the fish. But in my understanding from listening to the pros that intentionally run sort of one of each, or they used to run one of each, that's kind of the thing. Garmin, longer wavelengths have better penetration. So you're going to get further out. So you get to 100, 120 feet without much of a problem. But Garmin's going to give you better resolution. So like if the fish is 20, 30 foot out, you'll be able to see more detail, be able to distinguish what you're looking at a little bit easier. That's my experience with that.
So do you have a...
Determining if you're looking at bass, look at where they're sitting, how they're swimming, how they're reacting. Bass won't stack, the kind of the standard stuff that you'd have on any... They don't stack. They can. I've seen bass stack on top of each other before, but not like, crappie are just like feathers on a tree or leaves on a tree. They're just all over the place. But I don't always spot the fish. Like Darren says, well, I think I do use it a lot more to fish for specific fish. If there's a big crappie pile, I have found that there's probably an 18 plus inch bass sitting at the bottom of it, like sitting right below it.
Waiting for somebody to drop down?
Yeah, waiting for one to flutter down and, a half dying crappie to flutter down below it. And that's actually how I got one of my kicker fish at the bass event back in October. I was literally fishing a swim baits come over a crappie bed, and then I would let that thing drop past the crappie bed down to the bottom, and a 19 just came up and just slammed this swim bait.
I have noticed with so like Kessler and Dustin both run Lowrance, whatever you want to say it, and they're, from what I've figured out, their point of view, I guess, is shooting more of a laser beam, as where a Garmin might be a little wider, because I can see the fish, but sometimes I'm like, man, why didn't he bite? Well, I'm shining out there and say 120 feet, your beam is, say, 15 feet wide. So I could be 15 feet away from the fish, but it still looks like I'm right on top of the fish. As to where the beam that comes out of the Lowrance, I'm not sure on how all that works. Kessler could probably tell you way more about it. But it seems like I can see fish easier and I can see a lot like more, but I can't get the fine detail way out there because of the beam width. But if anything's up close, I can almost see their gills moving sometimes if it's set just right. Like it's especially with crappie fishing, I'll set it perfect for crappie. You can almost watch the fish breathe. It's incredible if you know what you're doing.
Yeah, I mentioned those longer wavelengths. Longer wavelengths will the scattering of the beam is, I think, inversely proportional to the wavelength. So yeah, what you're saying, if you have a smaller wavelength, beam's going to be wider. If you have a longer wavelength, your beam would be a little bit narrow.
Now, you talked about different frequencies. Can you select what frequency you're using?
Not on Livescope.
Forward facing.
I assume it uses like a chirp, so it varies the wavelength a little bit, but there's still some average, right? It's like sending like a wave packet. And I won't get into all the science of all that.
At different frequencies? Maybe?
Yeah, unlike downscan and side scan, where you usually get a couple frequencies to choose from that kind of optimize it. At least on the Lowrance Livescope, I don't think there's any frequency adjustment on the Livescope.
Okay. You talked about distance. You were talking about distances. So, what would be the farthest away that? I mean, can you see as far as you can cast or farther?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was using it when I was at the Lake of the Ozarks for the Big Bass 250. I think I was using it a lot further. I was using like 120 feet or so. And that's about the edge of what I can cast most things.
Yeah, so if you have really clear water and it's pretty deep, you can see really, really far. If you get to like St. Clair, I could see really far, but I couldn't get on fish at St. Clair for some reason. And the water was pretty clear up there. I don't know what caused it, but I just couldn't get on fish. Like I couldn't see the difference between carp and smallmouth and rock bass. I'm sure if I fished up there enough, I'd be able to tell. But I could just see fish, and that's most of my reason on why I didn't catch fish at St. Clair. I couldn't get on the fish like that. But clear water, you can see way more in. So like most of the lakes that we fish, I set my live scope way different than most people, and I set the depth. The furthest I ever go depth-wise is 25 feet, maybe. I don't care if it's 40, 50 feet deep, because I'm not fishing in 40 or 50 feet of water. I'm fishing in the 20 feet of water, 15 feet of water, 12 feet of water. I don't care.
Fishing the top half of
exactly. I could care less what's down at the bottom. Anything below that thermal climb, I don't care. Zero care in the world about it. And what that does is that makes your picture much larger, especially on a small screen. So your detail is so much more. So my distance, I never really go over 100 feet. I keep it inside 100 feet 90% of the time, just because I don't care what's out there. I care what's right here in front of me right now. That's what I'm trying to catch. Unless I'm scanning around trying to find like a brush pile or trying to find something like that, then I will set it a little different.
Which I'll say side scan is a much better tool for just
much
those little spots. It's just, especially if you have a motor, you have a good propulsion system, whether you're using a drive or a motor, setting on side scan and then just going over points and going over places that look like rocky banks and just looking for hard contours and brush piles and looking for that kind of stuff. And then when you find them, like I would recommend actually go past them, mark several, and then turn around and come back with the live scope and then hit each one of those marks. So that's kind of what I mean. Like the live scope kind of taught me how to use that side scan, because I was like, well, I could set side scan to 140 feet out both ways, and I can motor past at 3-4 miles an hour and scan a whole point all the way around, mark 4, 5, 6 pieces of structure, and then loop back around, come off, stay 80 foot off of them, come back with a live scope, and then pinpoint each one. And the other thing that side scan lets you do is that it really lets you have a better look at where the shad are oriented, which in different times of the year is really different. I will tell you, this is the first year I felt successful in the fall part of the year, and I attribute that mostly to just the use of electronics, because I was always heavy fishing jigs and things on the bottom all summer, and what I found was as we got closer to the fall, where the shad were became so much more important for finding where bass were. And so using that side scan to look for clouds of shad, and then coming back with live scope and seeing where are those shad in relation to that brush pile, and then fishing sort of along that relation. So the shad are sitting kind of deep compared to the structure, casting out between, on that side of the structure where the shad are, for example, with an A-rig or a swim bait or jerk bait. Yeah,
I've always had trouble trying to determine the depth of the shad. I mean, you see them on side scan, but it's hard to figure how tall they are in the water column. But what you're saying, you basically come at them from a different angle with the forward facing sonar. And then
I'll mark them on there. The best way to get the depth on side scan is if you can see the shadow, and then measure the distance from the shadow to where you see the ball. That can give you an idea on their depth. But then turning out the live scope will tell you exactly how deep they are if you can find that shad ball in live scope.
Now, you said something about scanning. I presume both of you have yours mounted at a mount that you can pick up and take off, or what type of mounting system are you using for your transducers?
Darren, you want to go?
So I get made fun of more than anybody in the club because I don't really pay much attention to my kayak. It's a summer hobby, and after the summer, it goes in the shed. So I spent $35 on PVC pipe and made a PVC pipe thing, and literally I put hose clamps on the PVC and hose clamped it to a ram ball mount, and I have no problem at all. I honestly think it's better than most of the ones on the market. It's perfect. I mean, it does everything I can possibly do with it. It squeaks a little bit. Other than that, it's a phenomenal little.
Nice.
On the other end of that, I was using the Rableza, was it Hex 30 or Hex Pole 30 or something like that. But I actually just upgraded to a Sniper Marine pole. I haven't used it yet, but the Hex pole is a really nice option. It's probably the best option that's not outrageously expensive that's out there. So if you're just getting into it, it's a really great option, that Hex 30 for kayaks. And it's real stable. You just grab a pole, go like this, mounts easy, gets on the kayak easy. Yeah, I not that there was too many problems with it, but I wanted something that didn't kind of twist into the way and stuff, and it kind of has that knob turn deal. I'm real picky. I'm picky.
He's getting too fancy with it.
Darren, he could have sent you $50 and you could have built him one, right?
I could have built a pretty nice one for $50.
Well, Darren, I might come to you for building mine.
I think I watched the YouTube video and I didn't like the way the guy made it, so I kind of bought all the stuff and then I watched the video, being stupid. And I watched the video and I was like, well, that sucks. I'm just gonna make my own. So I just kind of made my own, and it's due for another coat of spray paint. But other than that, it works great.
Yep.
And I'll be honest with people. The first year of me using the Livescope, I don't know if it helped me catch fish at all for like 12 months. Now, that being said, because like when I come back from tournament now, people are like, Livescope fish? And it's hit or miss. Like some days it's Livescope, and then some days it's not. It just kind of depends on what bite you find. I will say, like I said, different times of the year, it's different. When the bite's tough, though, it gives you an idea of how the fish are reacting, right? Specifically, the first tournament where I was like, I don't know if I would have limited if I didn't have Livescope. We were at the Cedar tournament this last year was that July? And I think people were saying it was kind of a tough bite. There's some good fish caught, but a lot of people down south, there was like 2 or 3 got blanked. One person packed up and went to the north ramp. I pulled a fish off the top of a brush pile off a point early on a swim bait, and then kind of stuck at that same brush pile for about an hour. Just different techniques, different things to try to get them to react. And I think I broke off my swim bait that I missed the first one on. And I don't think I had another one. It was like a big 6-inch mag draft. And so I threw a chatterbait out there just to have something. It was just like literally just bringing the chatterbait, was watching it go like, here's the brush pile. And I'm bringing that chatterbait like right up to the brush pile. And then like about a foot below the top. And then I'd pop it like right up to the top of the brush pile. And then let it drop for a second and then keep going. And it was like, first time I did that, I think I got a hit, got like a 16-incher. And then it was just brush pile, brush pile, brush pile. And I would get like one hit on every brush pile doing that. And got my limit doing that. I ended up getting a couple jigfish kickers in the afternoon, but I might have ended up with 8 fish that I submitted for that tournament. But if I even would have been able to get to a point to where I got to start getting kickers and stuff, wouldn't have happened without Livescope. So that was like the first tournament where just like doing something different and being able to see the fish sort of react off the top of the brush pile was something that, I probably wouldn't have sat there and thought like, oh yeah, just pop it. Not to mention, if you're fishing blind, knowing where your bait is in relation to that brush pile is nearly impossible. And I literally was going right up to it and popping it right on the top of that brush pile to get them to.
So when we had our tournament at Fletcher's Pond, Crossroads tournament up there, the first day we went out there and we had a really good day on jigs. We beat them up really hard on jigs. Me and Dustin especially beat them up hard. The second day, it got 25, 35 minutes into the tournament, early in the tournament, and Dustin calls me. He's like, hey, this isn't working. I haven't caught a fish yet. I haven't had a bite yet. And the day before, it was automatic. I told Dustin I figured it out just because of Livescope. I figured this out. There was a railroad bed and there was no vegetation on the railroad bed, so I could see clear as day. and I could see my jig coming down, and a fish would shoot out of the grass and sit there and just look at it. And it'd just sit there and stare at my jig. I figured out the day before, all you have to do is just drag it along there, you get bites. That day, if you drag it along and the fish would stop and stare at it, all you got to do is take your hand and hit the bottom of your rod, just jiggle it is all you're doing. Every single time I did that, I'd get a bite. And Dustin did it on the phone with me, and he caught a fish his very first time jiggling it. Just because I could see that fish coming out and looking at the bait, and they wanted it moving that day for some reason, but they didn't want it swimming. They just wanted it shaking on their nose, and it literally made the difference in that tournament for us. I mean, we still finished second, but still, I mean, it made a huge difference.
What I'm hearing you guys saying is it teaches more about fish behavior than it catches fish.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Sure. Yeah. There was, I mean, and again, I don't like to attribute too many wins to Livescope, but the second place finish at the October bass event, I told you about the one fish. This is a fish I never would have casted at. I never would have casted there, but I had spots where I knew they were holding fish. I could see fish. I could see bait everywhere. Wasn't really, in the days prior, I could buy some bites sort of on chatterbaits and on fluke and other things, and couldn't get a fish in the boat for like the first 2 or 3 hours of that tournament, and saw one fish out in the open. There was like this big long point. I won't tell you exactly where my spot was, but this big long point, and there was one stray fish. And honestly, if somebody would have said, look at this bass out here, I probably would know it's catfish. And you could see those two markers. It had the tail of a catfish roaming wildly out there. I had my crankbait in my hand, my DT20, and I've been watching that on Livescope for an hour, how the trajectory of the crank going down. This fish was suspended in about 20 foot of water, about 10 foot deep. And I knew exactly how far I could cast so that 20 foot crankbait, here's the fish, here's your window on my screen. And I had been watching that crank and take its trajectory down. And this is the luckiest cast in my life. But that crank came right down. Here's this fish just swimming. And I stopped it right by the fish. And I saw him turn. And I paused it right there. And then it shot after it. As soon as I started moving it again, it shot after it and hit it. And that was a 19.25, blind in one eye. So I had to get lucky enough to bring that crank down. And that's probably why he was just, out in the middle of nowhere. But I had to bring that crank down at the right depth and the right level, pause it at the right time. 100%. I don't touch that fish in, without Livescope. I don't cast at it. I don't see it. I don't cast cranks into open waters.
So it helps you catch disabled fish.
Right.
One eye, nearly dead fish. Okay.
I mean, he was probably in his last life. He was not near anything. I didn't see shad out there, but I just saw him on Livescope, just roaming around, just swimming around. Ironically, I turned around from that spot onto the edge of the point where there was some structure, and I don't even know if I could see the structure on the Livescope because it was real subtle, but you could feel it with a crank, like the bump. It hit something. And so I was like, well, there's big fish here. There's the bait that I see. I know that there's something good here. Stuck it out for another hour. And off that structure on the side of the point, about 30 minutes later or so, 45 minutes later, I pulled up a 20. So just cranking that structure down there. Didn't necessarily see the fish on Livescope, but one of those things where it kind of told me what was going on. That pause and how the fish reacted to the pause meant when I hit that structure, dum-dum, pause, rip it again, hit the bottom again, pause it again, and then that cadence giving me that feedback. Even if that fish didn't end up getting into the boat or catching it, it still told me a little bit about the cadence and what I kind of needed to do, even if the Livescope wasn't pinpointing every fish that I was casting.
Is there, if you were, go ahead, Darren.
I really noticed too with Livescope, and I'd never thought of this, never really paid attention with this, how much bass move. Like you think, oh, I had a bite in that spot, I'm gonna cast right back to it. That bass could be 45 feet away and you would have no idea. And you pull up to, say, a grass flat or to a big rock flat or a rock point or something, and you scan up there, the fish, like they are just zooming across that point. They are not just sitting still unless they're on like a brush pile or on a grass, like isolated grass spot. These fish are just roaming random all the time. It hurt my brain to see how much that happened. Like I had no idea these fish are just that random. That it makes sense on why you can catch fish randomly casting at the bank with a crankbait. I mean, it totally makes sense now because the fish are randomly roaming the grass lines. So that's why, like, if you pay attention to me whenever I fish, I'm always facing my live scope right down the grass line because I want that bait on the edge of that grass line for as long as I possibly can. I don't want it in the thick of it. I don't want it on the outside of it. I want it right on the edge where I'm hitting grass every once in a while. And without live scope, 50% of your time that you're casted in the water is wasted because you don't know where that is and you might be in the right spot for a little bit. Where with live scope, I've caught so many fish right next to the kayak because I'm still in the strike zone. I'm in the strike zone the whole entire time instead of just being in it for a minute or a second or two in your cast.
It really improves your efficiency the time that you have on the water, right? Especially
I'm glad I'm
tournament.
glad you know how to word things because I'm terrible at wording things.
I'll tell you this, and I don't know, maybe I'm bad with downscan, but whenever I was used to using downscan, there were times when I'd see that grass under my boat. And the thing with downscan is the cone is, I think, pretty big, right? And I'll be like, oh, I'm looking at grass, and I think I'm on the grass edge, and I'll cast, and I'll get no grass. And there's times when I'm looking at the downscan and I see no grass, and all of a sudden I pull up a bunch of grass. And I'm just like, I feel like it's a lot harder to pinpoint. But when you put that live scope out there, and you can see a lot clearer the density of the grass, like how sparse it is, where it drops off, and so you can pinpoint exactly those things and increase that cast efficiency quite a bit. And speaking of fish roaming, I can't remember what video I was watching recently. It was a young pro, it was a young elite. It might have been like Gillis or McKinney. They were talking about following a big group of bass with live scope, like just following them, trolling behind them, and they said that he followed them for 3 miles one day. And
Wow.
he's like, you can't rely on that pre-fishing information because if they move 3 miles in one day, they can move 20 miles in 4 days if you had to wait 4 days from between the beginning and the end of a tournament. It, it, there are some studies that say they don't move that much, and then there are some studies. There are people that actually will sit there and do things like that, and they will roam around a lot sometimes.
Or just the ability to do that, to lock on to a group of one group of fish,
Yeah.
and then follow them for miles. That's crazy. Susie, any questions?
Gosh, yeah. So what would you guys say was like the biggest hurdle and the smallest hurdle learning life scope when you first got it?
Biggest hurdle is stop fishing for crappie. Stop fishing for bluegill. I mean, it sounds so silly, sounds so dumb, but you see a mark on the graph and your brain's thinking, oh, it's a bass, oh, it's a bass, oh, it's a bass. Most of what you see out there is not bass. Very, very few of what you see are going to be bass. If you really want to learn live scope, go crappie fishing. It sounds funny, it sounds dumb. You will learn more crappie fishing with live scope than you will learn in a full day bass fishing. Just because the fish aren't running. The fish are not running away from you. They're sitting on brush piles. So you can pull up, drop an anchor, and you can be, say, 15 to 30 feet off a brush pile. So you know where the fish are. And you can put your graph or your scan on them, and you can play with all the settings in the world. Play with everything. Figure out where everything should be to make it as clear a picture as possible. And then start throwing a bait in there so you can see your bait falling, to see what a bait looks like, because it's going to take you a little while to figure out what you're looking for, because you've got to learn everything about it, learn what color you like, learn everything. But crappie fishing, you'll learn more than anything else, I think.
It's also just good practice to know what you're looking at, right? Because yeah, I mean, there's like this trigger in your brain when you're like looking at it, and you can see fish move and act, and it doesn't matter what size they are, it doesn't matter what kind of fish they are. Your brain just goes, oh man, this is so exciting to see fish moving. I want to catch that fish, because you want to learn. You're just intrigued, you're curious. And there's just something about seeing it, no matter what kind of fish it is, you're going to want to go after it. And what I would say is don't change anything that you're used to doing, because I think the tendency is when you're looking at it, you almost want to put your pole down and like find stuff and find them. You want to keep moving, keep doing the same things you've been doing, keep casting, and just learn. I would almost say just do that for a year. Learn what you're looking at, cast, keep doing what you've been doing. You know how to catch fish. Don't forget any of that, and watch what you're doing on the live scope so that you can see and learn. Because like how the fish will react will also tell you what kind of fish it is. There was I think it was 3 days out from our Cedar tournament. I was on the water till dark because, and there's one of two reasons why a fisherman stays on the water till dark. It was either a really good day or a really bad day. Fortunately, this was like a really good day. I was tearing them up. And there were bass on this point, like stacked on top of each other. If I could have counted them, there was probably 50 bass stacked in a like 20 square foot region. And anything in my brain would have said, crappie act like that, And I started throwing the jig and the shaky head and just boom. I started pulling up fish after fish after fish. They were all the same, they were all 14 to 16, and I was like, because I could see them on Livescope, I also knew this is either going to be here a tournament day or it's not going to be here. And it wasn't. I could pull right up to that point and be like, yeah, it's not like that. But things that you don't expect fish to do, you don't expect bass to be stacked up on top because they're territorial, they're supposed to spread out and all that. You don't know what you'll find, but just keep doing what you're used to doing. The jig, the shaky head, those techniques were things that I've thrown for years and been confident in. But then I realized they were bass just by watching it on Livescope unfold. But it was nothing that I wouldn't have done before. So you do what you do, and then there will be those tournaments where you're like 4 hours in and you're like, I don't have a fish, and you can try some crazy things.
Yeah. So have you guys ran into tournament days where you don't even use a Livescope or use it very little just because
every day
things are setting up?
No,
every day.
The Sankers tournament, the SICK Sankers tournament this year, Darren got second, I think, and I missed him. It was a good day. I don't think I saw a single fish I caught on Livescope. I was throwing the Nico rig and the shaky head in the grass. But that's a spring tournament, and that's kind of what I mean. It's seasonal. Like in those spring tournaments when they're going to be fired up and they're going to be shallow. Went out to Cedar in May, caught back-to-back 21 inchers, chatterbait in the grass, didn't have the Livescope down at all. It's one of those things. If the bluegill are spawning, usually you can just roll up and see the bluegill with your eyes, when they're spawning, so you don't need Livescope to tell you that. And if you don't want to, I do think there's something to Livescope being a little loud on the fish. They can hear it. So I try to leave it off until it gets to the summer, when they start going deep.
Mine is on from the very first minute my kayak is in the water to the very last minute I'm out. I just leave it on all day. Never had an issue. I've caught fish point blank from my Livescope. I mean, I literally couldn't reel anymore because the line was stopping me, and I've caught them that close. I think it does have an effect on them, especially a pressured body of water maybe. But for what we do, I don't think it matters personally. I do think the coolest thing I've seen on Livescope scope is watching bass attack shad balls. It is so cool because you'll be going along and you're like, oh, there's a big ball of shad and there's 2 or 3 bass underneath it. And all of a sudden there's just a wide open hole in the middle of the shad and the bass is just blowing right through the middle of it. It literally, they blow holes in the shad. It's insane to watch on Livescope.
I don't know what a bass looks like because that's a bass.
Yeah, that's not a catfish probably doing that.
Oh, yeah. And they move so fast. Like, they're chasing that school of shad. I can't believe it's efficient for them to eat shad and survive like that because of how much they have to swim. Like, they are chasing them shad insanely fast. It's incredible to me.
So, Darren, you talked about leaving yours running all day long. What type of battery system do you guys have that's supporting Livescope?
So there's a huge difference between Garmin and Lowrance. So on my Garmin, I have a 9-inch screen, the black box, which is what the head unit, I guess you'd call it, like the brains of the Livescope. And then the transmitter is all off of one battery. And that battery is a 20 amp, I believe. I think it's a 20 amp. I think it's amped brand, and it works just fine. I've never had an issue. 8 to 10 hours is typically what I get out of it. And I don't have much of an issue. I mean, it's going to die at the end of the day, typically, especially in the summertime. I've noticed if it gets hot, it dies a little quicker. Other than that, I can do that. And then I also have a 12, I think it's an 18 amp, and that's my backup. And I'll switch to it every once in a while, but 99% of the time, I don't even need it. I just use the 20 amp.
You don't want to get me into the battery. I have the trolling mode 36 volt Newport and I don't like carrying a battery for every single thing that I do. So I use all these converters and everything. I run everything off my 36 volt, 50 amp hour. But what I have learned is that Livescope is like having effectively it's like having a whole nother graph on your boat. So if you have a graph in Livescope, you should have enough power to assume that you're basically having two graphs. If you have two graphs in Livescope, you need to assume that you have the power requirements for three graphs. So with I use the HDS Live 9-inch. I have two of those, and I assume this is on the high side, but peak power pulls about 2 amps for each graph, and then I assume 2 amps for the Livescope, so 6 amps for those. So if I wanted to run that all day on a 12 volt, it would take, it'd take a 10-hour day. You're looking at 60 amp hours for a 10-hour day. But
doesn't Lawrence pull more?
Hours in the batteries.
Lawrence does pull more, correct, Kessler?
I haven't looked up. I assumed the max power pull is about the same. What I've noticed just from looking at voltages I always have the voltage up on my graphs and I'm looking at that. It seems like the Lawrence Livescope pulls power periodically. And so there must be like a surge every so many seconds, it seems like, is at least what it feels like. It seems weird, capacitors or whatever that could do something like that. But on average, it's not 6 amps. I don't know what Garmin is, though. I would assume it would be similar. So when you have a graph, 9-inch screen, 80% of the power to power that thing is the backlights to light the LCD, right? So that's another thing is when you're talking about just over power, you pull a lot more power when you have a sunny day and you're in the middle of the day because you have to turn the brightness all the way up on your screen. When you're in the morning and you turn that brightness down, you're drawing significantly less power. But I always try to stay on the conservative side so I don't have dead batteries in the middle of a tournament. So I always just tell everybody 2 amps per graph and then an extra 2 amps for your Livescope.
I believe.
So Jonathan, you're running 2 screens. Darren, are you running just one?
So I have to, but I never put the second one on. I never use anything but Livescope now. Livescope is my side scan. Livescope is my down scan. Livescope is everything. I just turn it on and let it run. I don't, just because I'm not a graph fisherman. I mean, most people know that. I'm a power fisherman. So I don't sit there and stare at the graph often. I just have it on. I use it to look at grass lines, use it to look at that brush pile, that rock pile. So I don't use it like most people should, I guess.
Susie, what kind of setup are you plan on using? One graph?
That's what I haven't decided on yet because I have Lawrence right now as, my general everyday thing. And then I will have my Garmin for the Livescope. So I'm still thinking of doing, 2 graphs, one just solely for Livescope and then my Lawrence for everything else, my side scan, down scan, or whatnot. I figure I'll probably have both set up for the first year just so that, I can try to learn, kind of get used to, all right, running side scan, looking at stuff, finding stuff with that, and then pulling up the Livescope, looking at those different things. I think it's going to be a lot.
Yeah.
Just learning how everything looks, learning how to break down water differently in a sense. And then, of course, it sounds like, knowing the distance of what you're looking at, how far away it is, and where exactly in the water you need to cast your bait too. I think that might be the biggest part of the biggest challenges that I'll have.
Yeah. And one of the things that I've noticed is whatever you think your jerk bait is going to go down to, it never gets nearly as. And I'll tell you, I've gotten a lot of tips lately on what the pros do with that, but I'll save that. But it really is, and knowing how far you cast is it like where to hit a spot. I always try to cast over like structure, like well past it, because I want to splash down on top of it. Oh, that's why when I was at Lake of the Ozarks, the water was a little bit clearer. I wanted to be a little bit more careful. I feel like there's probably more pressure there too compared to where we fish a lot. So I put it all the way out from, normally my normal run is about 80 feet, but I went out to 120 feet. And then, finding that sweet spot where you want that brush pile, because if it's too close to you, you can't get whatever it is deep, down there. Casting 20 feet, 30 feet past it, letting things get to the right depth. takes patience, and then, working them by on the right side or whatever that may be.
So let me kind of shift gears here a little bit. So Livescope, we're seeing that I wouldn't say it's standard, but it's becoming more and more common in modern kayaks, especially people that are fishing tournaments. So in your opinions, Jonathan and Darren, you've had a lot of experience using it. Susie's had a lot of experience in tournaments with anglers also using it, right? So is this setting up two classes of competition? In other words, is this an advantage to the point where when everyone has Livescope, the guy that doesn't, is he going to be at that big a disadvantage?
I think so. A year ago, I wouldn't have said that. But after this year, I really do think it puts you at an advantage. Whether it's a huge advantage, whether it means that the other person can't compete. I mean, there are different styles of fishing. There are fish shallow all year. There are fish kind of deep all year. But in terms of being well-rounded and being able to adapt and do whatever on the water in real time, yeah, it gives you an advantage.
Not only is it advantage, is it fair or unfair, you think? I mean, is it just, hey, I've got an extra tool you don't have, or is it two different leagues?
Depends on if you're talking about in SICK, or if you're talking, if you're a Bassmaster Elite, in the Elite series, they all have it, right? So it's a level playing field.
When didn't they change it where some tournaments are?
So it's an interesting thing that you bring that up, because I think this discussion is going to be had in regards to safety for kayaks, especially seeing some of the technology that's being released this year, where it involves multiple Livescope transducers and multiple boxes that all weigh 5, 6, 7 pounds each. I think it brings up a question about, like, at what point are you trying to put 250 pounds of gear onto a kayak that supports 325 pounds? So I think there's a safety concern there that is probably going to get brought up at some point for kayaks. In terms of competition, I think an experienced Livescope person probably fishes in a slightly higher class than somebody that's just fishing blind. I think so. I don't think that you can't compete, and I definitely think there are times of the year where the playing field is almost level. But in terms of, again, just being able to go out there consistently over a season, I think it gives an advantage.
Well, I know our Angler of the Year the last 2 years hasn't used it, right?
So that's the point I was going to bring up is I'm on the understanding that it's not an unfair advantage. To me, if you look at the top 5 people in the club, probably 2 out of the 5 have it, if I had to guess. I'm not sure who had 3rd, 4th, and 5th off the top of my head, but me and Dalton.
4 of the top 5 have it.
Okay, so top
you have
10.
It, I have it. Kevin has it. Who was 5?
I don't remember who had 5th. Oh, I can't remember. We didn't have Crossroads this year.
It was
Larry 5th?
I was just about to say, I think maybe it was Larry, or no, it was Jerry, wasn't it?
It might have been Jerry.
Yeah,
either way,
I think it was. Yes.
So it's at least
either way you put it. To me, every tournament we go to, that we've talked about this for years. It's the same 10 to 20 people at the top 10 every tournament. I mean, it doesn't matter if you have Livescope, because before we had Livescope, it was the same 10 to 15 people. After Livescope, 1 or 2 people might have changed. But to me, the best angler that day is going to win the tournament, no matter how the fish are biting. Sure, being able to see the fish can help. It can hurt you too. I mean, I've said that for years. The first year I had it, it hurt me more than it helped me, 100%. I tried catching fish that were bluegill. I tried catching fish that were crappie, catfish. And during a tournament, and I wasted 2 hours of my tournament where I could have been fishing shallow and probably catching fish. But I don't think out of a kayak there yet. In the next coming years, 100% could be there to the point it is an unfair advantage. But as of now, in our fisheries, I don't think it is, just because our fisheries don't set up great for Livescope most of the year. Summertime is the only time it's a little different, but 90% of the year, all spring and all fall, I don't think personally it matters that much.
I think it depends on it's angler specific too. I think there's a learning curve to it. I think if you're the kind of person that when you step on the water, if you stepped on the water without Livescope and you took every opportunity of what you saw in the water without Livescope, and you learned from it, like you were able to learn, adapt, apply, and you had that approach already, and then you take the same approach with Livescope, it will make you a better angler. Like, it will make you more well-rounded. And if you take what you're learning from it and you apply it, right? I mean, there are times I went into coves, like literally I keep bringing this is the last tournament I fished. Day before, the wind direction changed significantly between Friday and Saturday at the bass tournament in October. And when I went into this one cove with Livescope, scanned across, just take one scan across it. You can do the same thing with side scan. Shad everywhere. Wind shifts directions on Saturday, go into that cove, couldn't catch a bass in it. Right? So if you haven't used Livescope and you haven't picked up on what the wind's doing, right? Like, you have to put all those pieces together. Livescope can be a tool that can help you be a better fisherman. But if you haven't been picking up on what the wind's doing before you had Livescope, it's not going to make a difference when you have Livescope.
Yeah,
right?
It's not instant success. You still have to have you got more information coming in. You still have to.
That's why Darren
didn't
be allowed to have Livescope, because I'm scared of how good he might be. But, it's one of those things that it's just like how you use it. It's a tool, just like anything else. Just like the barometer is a tool, the temperature, water temp is a tool. And if you're going out there every day without Livescope and you're picking up on those things, you can become a good fisherman. Livescope lets you see a little bit extra about what the fish are doing. It kind of takes it to the next step. So if you're using it in that way, it will set you apart. But if you weren't doing those things before and you get Livescope, it's not instantly going to put you in a different level of competition. Mm-hmm. It's not going to do that. So you've got to kind of put the learning tools together. What are the keys? What's going on? And you can use it then as a tool to see what the fish are doing. But you got to also have that ability to adapt and apply it. And so, just if I go buy a Livescope and put it on my boat, if I go buy a Livescope, put it in my kayak, does it set you apart? No. And so I think that's why you see this diversity and why it's hard to nail down. Does it help or does it not help? I don't think there's a person that's used it for a couple years, had experience with it, not been like, yeah, this helps me catch more fish.
It's definitely not the easy button from the people I've talked to that are using it. I know one in particular that said it probably hurt their fishing the first year or so, at least.
But crappie fishing, it should be illegal. Crappie fishing is like, you think I'm joking? I will go up to a brush pile and be like, oh, okay, there's fish right here. I can see the biggest fish on this brush pile is on the left side top corner. I'll drop that jig on that fish's nose and catch that exact fish. I call it sniping. I'm literally sniping the biggest fish on the pile. It's incredible. It's incredible for crappie.
And I say that there are techniques that you hear the professionals use. Nobody that I know that uses Livescopes with kayaks does that.
We're not skilled. You can't out of a kayak most of the time.
A large amount of the summer trying to do that with varying degrees of success. Trying to stroll and mope and do these little minnow techniques and finesse techniques for these big fish that are sitting on these piles and stuff. And it's very time consuming. You get one shot at the fish with a really small finesse hook, and you're not going to get a second shot at that fish. And then you're going to go to a new brush pile, basically, because there's going to be one giant probably there in that type of fishing. And when you can do that, if you got 300 or 200 horsepower, Yamaha in the back, you might be able to do that efficiently. You're not going to do that with a NK300. So I think it's probably less useful for kayaks than it is for bass boats and bass competitions, but it's still one of those things that's just an invaluable tool if you put it together with all the other things that you read and see about, the other things that I put together for that particular tournament was not just wind direction, but how much flow and current is actually going around the cooling loop in St. Chris Lake, and noticing that in the direction of the current, even if it's a minimal current, every one of those points that faces the current, where the current's coming from, was rocky, and every back of those points was a lot softer because you got that current coming through, and just you feel that with a jig. You notice, oh, why is the shad are sitting on the one side of the point every time. Even if you go to the other side of the lake, it switches from north to south, south to north, because the current direction changes. And you just see all those pieces and put it together. But I'm going to tell you, buying a Livescope and being able to put all that together, the Livescope's not going to help you put all that together. You have to do that. And if you weren't doing that kind of stuff before, you can do that by feel with crankbaits and jigs. You know the current, and you can look that stuff up. Livescope might help you see those fish, but put the pattern together that's going to let you repeat that from point to point to point to point to point isn't there. And I was talking to Dustin earlier today, and he was saying, "Oh, Livescope, it's basically might as well be sight fishing." And I've thought about that since he said it, and I was like, no. There are instances like that. Like I talked about a few of them, but it isn't, not for kayaks. The stability in kayaks isn't there. The cast distance, from a seated position and stuff isn't there. It's a tool, and you can use it to, I think, improve your game over the course of a couple years. But it is definitely not you go spend this $1,200 and you're instantly going to go into a new class of competition.
Yeah. Well, right at an hour, Susie, you have any more questions?
Well, not necessarily questions, but definitely wanted to, at least give my perspective on, LiveScope. Having never used it, but competing against, other anglers that do have it and whatnot. It's kind of like Jonathan says, it's just another tool in the toolbox, and how you use it, when you use it, how you're using your knowledge and skills to it, how you're putting applications together, breaking down water. I think those are the biggest things that come down to everything. Do I expect LifeScope to make me, win all the tournaments and everything this year? No, my biggest goals with it is just learning more about how the fish behave, how they look underwater, learning about, structure, whether it be, wood, grass, rock, that type of thing, understanding it better in a sense. I'm not going in expecting like, oh my gosh, this is like, the game changer type of thing. I think it's just another tool in the box that's just gonna hopefully, I say hopefully, help me learn better and at least, become a better angler in that sense and whatnot. So that's just kind of my 2 cents on it.
Outstanding. When I was getting ready for this episode tonight, something occurred to me. We'll say it. So I got this little relic that I collected years ago in the background of the podcast. This thing was made in about 1958.
Yeah.
And I am sure that back then, in the late 50s, early 60s, when this thing came out and people said, "Oh my God, you can see what the depth is, and you can see fish on the dial, and this is just crazy." I wonder if they had very similar conversations about this old thing.
It is something.
That's
I don't
awesome.
know about that technology. Bassmaster, Bass in general, has a long cyclical history of, calling something cheating because the new guys are using it and the old guys don't like it, and then they flip their script. So many X years later, they change their mind.
Yeah. Well,
Makes you wonder what, is going to be coming out in the next 5 years, 10 years. I mean, we're looking at this right now, like, holy crap, look at what we can see and do now, like 10 years from now. Like, it's probably going to blow our minds when we look back on it.
Yeah, there's already rumors of VR goggles hooked up to those units and things. It's like, that's going to be the next step.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know why we don't just have underwater cameras, just floating down there at this point. I think of some footage from this last year of an angler fishing, and they had the drones out for the TV coverage, and you could just see these 4 or 5 pound bass shallow, and he's casting 10 feet to the left of him, and you're just like, is he gonna cast right?
That's good. I did notice there were some rules changes that came out about the use of drones, right?
Yeah, I think
can't remember which organization it was.
They all have
drones in practice.
Some limitations now. My understanding is Bass did a draw for this next year. So in the Elite Series, I think half the tournaments are going to allow LiveScope and half won't. I think they drew out of a hat which ones would have them.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they do have it, they're now limited to one LiveScope transducer, and then they put a limit on the amount of the total size of all the screens added together, I think. So they can do like 3 small screens or 1 big screen, but like there's like an amount of screens that they can put on their boat, and then limited to one LiveScope transducer, which I think something, and this is kind of hinted at what I said earlier, I think is something that we should look at for two reasons. One is safety, because we're not bass boats and we can't put 1,000 pounds of electronics on our boats, but we might want to and we might try, and then that might put us at unnecessary risks. So one is a safety concern, and the other one is also, again, I said it's not one of these things that's going to instantly put you in a different category, but it is one of those things where it can make you, I believe it can make you a better angler. And are we setting the curve for entry at too high of a bar? And I don't think Livescope is there, but maybe some of this. I mean, now we have Live 360 is basically what came out this year, right? So, but to do it, you have to have 2 transducers and 2 black boxes, and now you're talking about a ton of weight you're adding. And I would rather get ahead of that and say, if you want to do that on your own time, that's fine. Let's put some kind of a cap at some point and say, let's try not to get a little too, you see these AI images of boats with 50 screens on them and everything else. We probably ought to put something up there to say, hey, we don't need to be running 50,000 pounds of electronics on our kayaks, and we want to say that before somebody goes out and spends. I think it would set you back almost $4,000 if you wanted to do this Live 360 when it's all said and done. So, I don't want you to go spend $4,000 and then be like, sorry, you can't use that. So at some point, we probably ought to set something that puts some type of limitations, at least whether it's weight, whether it's electronics, whether it's battery weight, screen sizes, transducer numbers.
It's one thing, I think, for the grassroots tournament trails like SICK, where I think that's a good point about the barrier to entry, because we try to recruit people to say, hey, all you need is something that floats well and a paddle, and you can compete. But if it gets to the point where that's not possible, it's probably a discussion to be had. But certainly in your more pricier events where your entry fees more and you're likely more seasoned anglers, you have a little more latitude there. But
that are the same. SICK, we're not trying to be trailblazers at SICK. So, I look at what Bass did is setting a precedent in what the field considers to be fair competition and putting some kind of a limit on making this a little too outrageous. So the fact that they set some rule on like a 1 transducer limit and screen size limit, I think, not trying to be trailblazers, but it sets something up. And I'll just preface this. There's been no decisions. There will be no changes to the rules for 2026. But looking at 2027, it's, prepare that we may implement something along the lines of Bass, depending on how our discussions go. Feel free to let us know what you think too. So talk to me or a board member about what you think, so that your opinions can be shared. I feel like by 2027, we'll probably be kind of falling a little bit in line with Bass. We probably won't be banning Livescope in any regards. A lot of people have invested in that, and I think it's more fun to have competitions where more people get limits. I don't like those tournaments where we go out there. It's been a long time since SICK has been won without a limit, a SICK tournament. But, Darren and I and Susie have been in SICK long enough to see tournaments without a limit at a SICK event. That being said, I think it's more fun when people do have that technology and are allowed to use it. So we probably won't have bans or hat draws to get rid of it for anything like that, but at least putting some kind of a cap on where the technology goes beyond this.
Best way to fix that is no more summer tournaments. Only springtime.
Only spring.
Springtime.
Too hot to fish in the summer.
Amen.
What a great conversation. I hope that I know I learned a lot just hearing you guys talk, and I think we answered a lot of questions that people that are listeners might have had. So you guys are very open and honest about the pluses and the minuses and things to watch out for. So thanks all of you for showing up tonight, and we will be back soon with another edition. So make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you know when we're back up and running. So it'll be spring before you know it, folks. So hold on, we'll go fishing soon.